Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Good morning, good, beautiful morning. It's a little overcast here in Jerusalem, and we are experiencing a heat wave, but rumor has it that we'll be out of it soon enough. So first of all, I want to say hello to everybody, and my name is Andrea Simintov, and you are listening to Pull Up a Chair on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And I see this morning we have, well, this early morning in Jerusalem, but it's late at night. We have listeners in from the United States and Canada, and early morning or late at night, however one you look at it, from the United Kingdom, Germany, the Netherlands. Hello, Japan. That's a nice surprise this morning. And, of course, Jamaica. And, of course, how can we not say Boker Tov, Eretz Israel? You know, I figured out something amazing. If we do not talk about COVID, if we do not talk about coronavirus, if we do not spend our days wringing our hands and checking the statistics, it's staggering how much time we have in our days. It's become all-consuming. And I don't know about you, but I'm frightened. I'm frightened that when this is over, please God, let it be soon, we will look back at all of the hand-wringing time and the chit-chat and every piece of news as it relates to coronavirus, how much time it took from our holy, blessed, and precious hours that we have on this earth. I myself have been figuring it out that by not dealing with coronavirus, I have cleaned out closets. It's amazing. I am reading books. There are books to be read. There's time for that now. I can listen to a lot. I can listen to many more Torah talks. And you know what? I'm listening to a lot of Motown and bluegrass. So again, we're moments away from standing at the open doors of heaven. How are we using this time? How are we using these days? I tell you, these are very important times, and I say we have an opportunity to recreate the world, because it's the world's birthday coming up, my friends, and we're in charge. So please, I beg of you, let's together not squander these opportunities. The king is in the field. Very soon, Rosh HaShanah is coming. This is Andrea Simintov. I'll speak with you on the other side.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Pull up a chair because you're listening to Pull Up a Chair. Oh, I see. We've had a couple more countries join us this morning. India, Colombia, and Australia are listening in. I was wondering about you, Australia. Where the heck have you been? Okay, great. So I'm very happy that you're with us. Happy just as this is a COVID-free show. Dafka, deliberately. A lot of thoughts. First of all, drop me a note when you're listening into the chat room. Drop me a note. Tell me where you're listening in from. It really makes a huge difference. And I become very, very upbeat. I love it. I like the idea that in so many ways, in negative ways, the world has become smaller. But you know what? In so many positive ways. Let's just all gather together in my living room, your living rooms, and let's be holy together. came across a lovely, lovely, lovely statement. It's at this time of year. And I want to share with you that there once was a king, who occasionally took off his royal robes and he put on the simple clothing of the common people. And he would go out into his kingdom and kind of bop around unnoticed, and he would mingle with his subjects, chat with the common man to see what their lives were really like and what they really needed. One day, the king happened to sit down on a bench near a peasant, and he struck up a conversation with him. A lot of the vagaries of the day back and forth, I guess the COVID talk. And after the king left and the simple man found out that the person with whom he had been speaking was none other than the king, he was distressed. Oh my gosh, the king was so close to me, he cried. I had the opportunity to ask for whatever I desired, but instead, I squandered this golden opportunity. Every minute of every day throughout the year, King, we've got a front row seat. Well, maybe not front row, but we're somewhere in the palace. And now the benches are pulled close. What are we doing during this time? Who's in charge? God or Netflix? Us or the COVID czar? Just a thought. I needed it. I feel terrible. My husband, Holy Ronnie, he's blowing the shofar every morning, 30 days prior to Rosh HaShanah, the head of the year. He's blowing the shofar. And I said to him, please, Ronnie, you have to blow it on the show this morning. He said, yeah, he's waiting. He was here. He was on Spilkes. He was all excited. And then he had to go to work. So please, God, next week on our last show together before we bring in the era of mega holiness, hopefully we'll all be able to listen to shofar together. All right, had an incredible dinner meeting this week. We visit with friends about once a month. We try to get together. We try to make it a Rosh Chodesh thing, a monthly get together, but it didn't work out this way. And we have this new thing, because we're of this certain age, we all bring our own food, because I have to cook one way for Ronnie, and then I eat another way, and we can't eat this and we can't eat that, and too much potassium, and I don't eat meat. And then these other people live on potatoes and beans. And we made this decision. We all bring our own food and we sit together, and then you don't have and the whole purpose is just to be together, especially during these times when socializing, you can't kind of duck out to a cafe. And we were visiting with our friend who is a renowned physician. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm working very hard at disguising. I'm going to give him a whole made up name. I hope I can remember the name because I'm losing a lot of brain cells even as we sit here. But I must preface this because we are friends. And I preface this by telling you that our friend is perceived in the medical field. Of course, he's retired now. He's a much older fellow. But all his years, he was one of those stereotypical enraged heads of the department. People were frightened of him. They all said, let Alfred be my doctor if I'm in a life and death decision. But don't let him yell at me. Don't let him talk to me. He was just mean and crazed and gruff and foul-mouthed and really never watched if he thought it came out. If he had thoughts about your ethnicity or your appearance, you heard it. And he was really that kind of a guy. Really, his reputation preceded him. And he told this incredible story, very humbling story. And I'm going to tell it wrong because that's what I do best, tell stories wrong. He's cynical guy. Throws out assignments and you have to be thrilled to get them. And one night, he was not on duty. He was the head of a trauma department in a very major, very respected hospital in Johannesburg. And actually, this hospital had 2 trauma departments, but it wasn't known. It was perceived to be by outsiders as 1 trauma department, but it wasn't true. 1 section of the trauma department was for the cases that were not going to recover. And where they didn't put tons of energy in, they kept the patients comfortable. They informed the families. They let the families sit, but they knew that there was no hope. And then there was the other trauma department, which was very proactive, but it was all under the same umbrella. And he had it covered, and he was lying down in his hospital room hiding, and he was not on duty, and he gets paged. Dr. Sensenbach, made up name, please get to the trauma department. And he ignores it. He says, call the doctors in charge. Nobody who was in charge seemed to have followed up with this. And they page him again. And they said, no, it's one of our staff members. And sure enough, his secretary from the cardiac department had a major heart attack and was on life support. And he finally, nobody was there. And so he answered his beeper call and he went down and he supervised. And anyway, they saved his life. Here comes the big hero. That's not the story. He didn't understand where the other doctors were. But most important, he went back to the alerting department and he said, who paged me? Because he didn't understand why he was paged and not the other doctor in charge. And the woman in the notification department said, no one paged you. And he said, no, I was paged. And she said, well, I've been on duty all day and no one paged you. He went back to 2 of the other secretaries in the trauma department and said to them, I was paged. Who paged me? And they said, no one paged you. We were kind of surprised when you showed up. So he looked at his beeper. It was the days of the beepers. Remember that? The guys walking around, the beep, beep. They would leave the shul on Shabbos to answer their beepers. And there was no indication on his beepers that he had been beeped. But he knew that he had been beeped. He had been beeped. To this day, decades later, he knows who paged him. And he's such a pragmatist and such a cynic. And he never told the story. But he knows who paged him. He was paged directly from heaven. It was the only answer. And I thought to myself, are we heeding the pages? Pages, not the page to the book. The pages from heaven? Are we answering our high alerts? Or is there so much music? Is there so much of a cacophony? Are we becoming so blinded by the crap that envelops our lives that we can't even hear, that our beepers seem to be forever on silent? Alfred, who was the beeper, he beeped others. He was on the receiving end. And then he told the same evening an incredible story about a boy from the Jewish community who had been in a terrible motorcycle accident on life support. There was no hope. And he was called at home and said, the family wants you to come. And he said, but there's nothing that they can do. The best doctors are in charge. No, the family wants you to come. And he came and he readjusted the machines and he looked and he said, we hope. And then he saw the mother in a corner and she was praying. But he said to me, no, it's wrong. She wasn't praying, because praying very often denotes a beseeching, and you see the passion and you see the panic. She was chatting. There were no tears. She was in a corner and she was having a one-on-one conversation with God in heaven. No tears. There was a back and forth. There was a conversation going on. He understood, Alfred understood that she understood that whatever his will was, it was not the result of not enough communication, but a result out of sincere back and forth and ultimate deference to greater wisdom and authority. The boy survived. Not only did he survive, today he is a father. The boy is, I believe, becoming a grandfather. But Alfred, this religious man, saw it's not a matter of waiting until our backs are in the corner and our loved ones are on life support. Because aren't we all on life support? It's to open the dialogue. These are the days when we must remember we are created in his image. And yes, we can talk to our equals. The dialogue's going. My name is Andrea Simantov. Let's keep our dialogue going on the other side.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Tamar? She's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yona. And yes, I can be all of those things. But at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image. It's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel.
Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
Okay, good morning. I'm saying good morning because I'm seeing LN just checked into the chat room. Very nice. Happy to see you here. All right. Yeah, I hope. All right. I hope that I'm handing over my excitement and my awe. And that when you tell me a story, to know that I really try to embrace it and see the cast of characters. I can't even tell you how humbling it was to hear our friend Alfred tell this story, especially if you understand what a stereotypical grouch and seemingly know-it-all this holy man is. And his ability to feel vulnerable enough and safe enough with us, all of us, God's children, to share this incredibly intimate memory. And what an honor it was to be at the receiving end of that story. And I just love sharing this stuff and hearing your stories as well. Thinking about it, I'm feeling high this morning. I'm feeling really hot. It's great. Ronnie starts the day. He blows that shofar, and I get my day started before I listen to Motown. And I was thinking about how, here, B'nai Yisrael, the children of Israel, I just imagine what it was like standing at the cusp, standing at the foot of Sinai, ready to receive the Torah, and then later, ready to receive Moshe's commandments. and to be told, I'm not going to be here. You're on your own. And I'm thinking that it's inevitable that the Jewish people could not possibly maintain that spiritual level that we had in Sinai. I mean, there were no distractions. There was no MTV. But like now they're going to leave. They're leaving these desert wanderings. And the people are about to re-enter the natural world with this constant demand for human initiative to secure, to say, are we going to put in a backyard pool or not this year? Are we going to go on that vacation? You can go to Greece. Even if you live in Israel or in England, you can travel to Greece even during this year. Are we going to take a vacation? Are we going to put in a new place or, entertainment room? The children of Israel together, they abandoned this homogeneous, this insulated, incredibly holy and lofty social environment to enter the land of the mundane. It's almost stupid to think that we can hold that level. You can't hold that level all the time. You have to go to the bathroom once in a while. You have to get a flu shot. You have to attend to a child's bruised knee. Sometimes you need milk in the fridge. You can't live forever at the summit. There has to be movement, change, displacement. And all roads from that mountaintop, they lead down. And even Moshe couldn't sustain that superhuman level he reached at Sinai. He was compelled 3 times to descend from the pinnacle and return to normal existence. But that's why we're given the gift of prayer. We're given the gift of interaction. We're given the gift of using our holy tongues. We're given the gift of attempt to ascend the summit. A couple of times a day, couple of times a month, couple of times a year. Just thinking about it. Went through my books, came across a workbook, we call it in Hebrew a choveret, that I bought, oh my gosh, I bought it in the year Gimel. It was a workbook printed by Rabbi Joel Padowitz, Padowitz. I don't know if it's still available. I think you could buy, if it's available, you could get it at aish.com, aish.com. And this book is called 40 Days to Anew You. It was a workbook and a whole bunch of pages, and we don't have 40 days. We have about 40 hours left. No, we have more. But anyway, it was an incredible book, and he talks about Elul, the month that brings us up to Tishrei, the month that brings us up to Rosh HaShanah and the 10 days of repentance. And he talks about Elul, where we still are, and we talked about it so many weeks, but one of the sections I wanted to share with you, coaching sections, I call it. And he says, spending a few minutes visualizing the ideal you. And if you don't write it down, because I am going to go quickly, we have a lot of stuff to cover today, but you can listen to the shows or write it to me, Andrea@IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and I will send you these questions for us to think about in the days leading up to our prayers. So in visualizing where we want to be this year, where we want to hold, we have to ask these questions. What kind of friend or what kind of parent would we like to be? How would we like to act in public? How would you run your private affairs? In the year ahead, what habits would I like to break? In this year ahead, how would I like to speak? In this year ahead, to what would I devote my time and energies? In this year ahead, what would I like to understand? In this year ahead, what spheres, in what orbit would I like to exercise greater control? What things would I rather not repeatedly enter my mind? In this year ahead, what condition would I like my body to be in? In this year ahead, in what areas would I like to be more careful? And on the flip side, in this year ahead, in what arenas would I like to be more carefree? And Rabbi Padowitz says that once we've generalized the ideal you, the ideal me, try to describe that person in the most specific detail possible. To sit and say, in the year ahead, this is how I envision myself. Don't believe it. You may not become exactly that person. But if you don't know where you're trying to go, you don't even know what highway to take. And in articulating these concrete goals, we're taking our first steps towards permanent change for the better. The Talmud tells us, in the way in which a person wants to go, that is the way in which he will be led. This is from Spiritual Accounting, A Practical Guide to Permanent Change by Rabbi Padowitz. Drop me a note. I'll send you the list. Listen, we're a couple of thoughts in the week that's coming up ahead. Our job, who's our father? Who's our parent? To whom can we turn? That's God. And what's our job? We have to give our Father pleasure. We have to give our Father naches. That's what Rosh HaShanah is. Getting ready. Taking our thought to look at all of creation. It's magnificent. What is our relationship? God gave us power to make his creation either pleasurable for him or tedious, terrible. This is what I've given you, and this is what you're making it. We don't want to be a drudgery for God. We want God to look at us and say, good job, nice work. I like what you're doing with it. I think about this, lahavdil. I'm stepping away from text a second. I think about when we pollute our bodies. We pollute it with food. We pollute it with drug. We pollute it with drink. We pollute it with tobacco. We pollute it with unholy thoughts, ugly thoughts. And I'm thinking, how sad God must feel what he's given us. Our vision is a little different from that Dante's Inferno, that fire and brimstone version. You better get your act together because we're going to judge you. No, he's going to judge us, but he's going to check it out to see where we're finding our pleasure and where he can meet us in the middle. Of course, God will make it good. Our job is to throw up our arms and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Look at me, Daddy. I can ride on two wheels. I just love this stuff. All right. Who would we like to be? Where are we holding? Where are we going? First, Elul. We talked about Alfred Sensenbach. Isn't that a great name? I made it up. All right. Drop me your note. It's going to be a very different holiday this year. How is it going to be different for you and your family? What is going to be different? Are you going to be actually going to synagogue? Are you going to be listening to shofar with a group, a minyan of Jews? Or are you going to be creating your own holy space and praying that next year will be different and that you could join shoulder to shoulder? Very curious. Ronnie and I are still hashing it out. We don't know if we're going to be alone at home or we're going to join family in a big open air space. It's rough, but I will be thinking about you and curious to have your thoughts. Andrea Simantov, Parsha on the other side.
In a time where feelings have become fact where rational thought and common sense has disappeared. One man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobaker, your political hitman.
Political Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on The Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
And we're back. Andrea Simintov, pull up a chair. IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. All right. Just got a note during the break, very cute, from a bride. Yesterday morning, you know that I help make brides beautiful for their wedding day. And I thought this is so appropriate for our holy show, because I had a bride yesterday morning, and I actually drove her to her wedding so that it's hot in Israel, so that she wouldn't melt waiting. And I didn't want her to drive herself to the wedding. Anyway, my bride, my kala, is how you say a bride in Hebrew. My bride was 69 years old. She's widowed, and she met a widower, and they chose to marry. And we talk a lot about choice on this show. Everything is choice. Be very careful before we utter the words, I had no choice. I had to eat it. I had no choice. I had to ignore her. I had no choice. I had to scream at them. I had no choice. All the negatives. Yes, we did have a choice. Choice. There's many choices, and so many choices of how we live. I speak very frequently about people who choose not to date. They're frightened. They don't want to fall in love because you know what? They could get hurt. Take it from me. I heard about that. I heard about getting hurt. Oh boy, do we get hurt. Oh boy, are we challenged to become resilient. And that may be true, but you know what? Nothing beats starting that new initiative, starting that new adventure, whether it's opening up a business, whether it's opening up a new jar of face cream, or whether it's standing under a chuppah with somebody who you really don't know that well and recreating the world, starting a new life. And I just got this beautiful note, and I thought to myself, let me ask you, because I'm asking myself. I don't ask you anything I don't ask for myself. What am I going to do in the days ahead to recreate the world? It is the world's birth day, not birthday. The birth day is coming up. We have to celebrate. Is it business as usual? Or are we going to recreate the holy world? Okay. Parsha, it's still Parsha, but not Parsha by accident, Parsha by Dafka, Parsha deliberately. This Parsha is called Nitzavim Vayelech. And we're going to see Moshe, a physically weakening Moshe, a Moshe who can no longer lead the Jewish people. He informs us. He says, one second, let me open this up to be with you guys. He informs us that he's no longer allowed to forth out or to come in. Moshe, whose eyes did not dim even in death, is now empty of his superhuman powers. He's subject to that same mortality that faces you and me. It's at this moment that Moshe, he doesn't wallow in sadness, and he doesn't seem to be having this heart checkup, life in review. and reviewing his disappointments and his regrets. No. He expresses no regrets. He doesn't refer to those who have persecuted him, those who injured his pride, those who dissed him, those who questioned his worth or doubted his speech-impeded words. Rather, his whole focus is on the future of the Jewish people. He points out that their future failings are going to lead them into tragedy and defeat, but never into complete destruction. Yeah, you heard it here. He cautions them against falling into the trap of adopting new ideas and mores simply for newness and change. And he makes it very, very clear that the covenant of Israel with God and his Torah, it contains no escape clauses, no cancellation clauses, no one from column A and two from column B, but the bond is eternal. It's not ours to give away. He sees the future in this Moshe Rabbeinu, and he continues to look forward to new generations, and indeed to endless challenges. And in the end, Moshe is a leader. He's not a historian. This is why there arose in Israel none like Moshe. The Moshe teaches us, Vayelech Moshe, and Moshe went, he walked. Moshe says, I can't go forth and I can't return any longer. So what is it? Did he go? Did he come? Vayelech Moshe, his goings and comings are in the spiritual realm. He went and he invested in Am Yisrael, Am Yehudim. He invested in them, and what he invested, this is what remains active. This is what remains important. This is what remains eternal. His passing, his soul going back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is merely incidental. Leadership and inspiration is not judged by physical criteria. Rabbi Beryl Wine brings down when discussing this parsha. He reminds us that Franklin Roosevelt was afflicted with polio before he rose and he became the president of the United States. Franklin Roosevelt was reckoned to be, he was considered to be one of the strongest and most... apparently we got disconnected and I am back. All right. So Franklin Roosevelt, he was, let me just get back to that. He was, he had polio, and yet he was considered to be one of the greatest presidents that ever, I know we have some Jewish disputes about him, but he was considered to be one of the greatest presidents in American history. His polio did not define him. If we see this truism in life of regular human beings, how much more so is it obvious in the life and achievements of Moshe? Vayelech not only means that Moshe once went, but it also implies grammatically in Hebrew that Moshe is still going forth. Moshe is still with us. The Jewish people are still guided by his Torah and teachings and his legacy. In these final parshas, at the approaching of the year, we have to look at this. His review is really the main contents of our lives. And our covenant is renewed again and again in this week's parsha. It's not an exaggeration to say that every day we rebuild and we recreate. Stay with me 1 second, boys and girls. I just want to put this on a speaker, okay? Don't know if you can actually hear me. Our relationship to God and our relationship to ourselves is under constant review. It has to be self-evident that in our part, We have to enthusiastically renew our allegiance every day, every minute in this life and year. In closing, I want to give us all an assignment. Nitzavim, this parsha begins with the words, you're standing this day, all of you, before the Lord your God. Whatever the need arises to take action on behalf of Judaism, are we waging our good fight for the glory of heaven? Are we waging a good fight for one another? It's not for us to say, why choose me of all people? Leave it to the teacher, the rabbis, and the leaders of the community. No, it's not what we say. When the need arises to act before our God in heaven, we have to be standing, all of us, ready for action, and not be content to leave the responsibility to our leaders. All of us. Let's talk about this at our Shabbos tables. Let's ask each other, our parents, our children, and ourselves, what can we do for God, for the state of Israel, and indeed for one another. Andrea Simintov, Shabbat, Shalom, U'Mivorach.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicoleko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.